Terra is the cradle world of humanity. It was once a planet plagued by anarchy, its people plunged into the darkest of ages, ruled by ruthless warlords and even minions of the Chaos Gods. Yes, the forces of the Dark Pantheon fought upon Terra's surface in great numbers prior to the Unification Wars. The capricious gods of the Warp Plane enslaved many an aspiring warlord to their own will, setting loose these terrors to sow havoc, murder, and even cannibalism across the surface of old Earth. A scarce few were safe in these times. Perhaps even less were worth saving. For in the words of Constantine Valdor himself, during those days of anarchy, a number of beliefs were held, leading to corruption. When the human soul is left untended, this leads to corruption, which has the tendency to open doors. And on Terra, many doors were left open. But we are getting ahead of ourselves, for the period we wish to speak of today was the nihilistic era prior to the Emperor's agents making themselves known. If you wish to learn more of the Emperor's exploits alongside his mighty Thunder Warriors, check out this video on our YouTube page, or otherwise follow the link on the screen now or in the video description below. Make sure to like, share and subscribe, and you can become a part of this growing global community. Within the description you'll find links to some of our most viewed content, as well as to our community Discord where we talk lore and hobby, as well as to our Patreon. Join us now as we explore Terra during the Age of Strife, before the Emperor began to steer humanity's destiny in earnest. In the current era of 40k, Terra is a planet of cities layered upon cities. Ancient ruins of forgotten ages exist in a decrepit stasis for miles underneath the tread of unsuspecting, ignorant civilians. So mysterious and forgotten are these ruined labyrinths that none but blind, mutated beasts have tread their paths in millennia. Likewise, Terra's surface is a veritable maze of habblocks and warrens where the darkest deeds are carried out upon the holiest planet in all the galaxy. You can actually find an in-depth exploration of Terra's cities, subterranean ruins, as well as inside the Imperial Palace, linked on the screen now if you're on a PC or TV, or otherwise within the description below. During the Age of Strife though, despite Terra's status as the cradle world from where mankind had previously set out to populate the stars, it was not always a planet of sacred practices or even of basic constituted law. Following the dark age of technology, the Age of Strife, also known simply as the Anarchy, would encompass approximately 5,000 years, a hellish period that existed from the 25th millennium to the 30th. During this era, Terra resembled nothing more than a desolate wasteland, the ordinary human mere playthings for marauding bands of techno-barbarian tribes, gene witches, and wandering, marauding tribes of cruel cannibals. For most, to live within that period called now the Age of Strife was merely to exist. For the hard done by populace unlucky enough to live during that time, joy was not something which came often, for there was nothing to be joyous for. Yes, there existed the innocence of children playing, or the contentment one feels after a hard day's labour, but for most, everything could be snatched away in terrifying, bloody swiftness. It had even been stated that so lawless and violent was this era that to survive, one either had to be lucky or very devious. In fact, it was during this time that humanity's racial memory was instilled with hate towards the mutant, the psyker, and the xenos. Forever preyed upon by these foul breeds, we can see clearly that millennia of suffering at their hands has not yet erased the pervasive hatred felt by mankind against this filth. Now, as you're probably aware, Terra during this age was not ruled by one unified regime or administration. Not in the least. Following a truly harrowing decline, Terra's people were starving, scattered, and desperate. The majority of technology which had enforced mankind's progression to a galactic power was lost, and so too was the knowledge to use it. In the largest, most disastrous event of humanity's history, the cradle world of mankind would regress into a techno-barbaric, medieval-type state. It just so happened that whilst the anarchic period bridging the tail end of the age of technology to the age of strife, humankind's evolution into a psychic species would begin in earnest. Whilst one of the greatest civilizations the galaxy had ever seen collapsed in on itself, individuals were slowly beginning to evolve into psychically talented people, many completely lacking control of their powers, and so either becoming doorways into the materium for fierce warp entities, or otherwise possessed by them. From the vast sprawling manufactura which dominated Europa's landscape, to the more natural, though dangerous wild steppes of Asia, leaderless populations would become subservient to those in power, for in the most basic societies, might equals authority more often than not. This meant living under the heel of some tyrant or confederacy of such in order to survive or protect one's family or holdings. The horrors perpetrated by the so-called people of this era are as varied as they are savage. Let's explore some of the clans and kingdoms who enjoyed a prosperous reign at one time or another during that age. There are several maps published by various artists of the 40k community. In this one, we can view the colour coding of each kingdom very clearly to gain an instant understanding of the larger players on the global political state, at least nearing the end of the Age of Strife. We can see larger empires are Ursh, the Pan-Pacific Empire, the Antarctic kingdoms, America, and High Brazil. These were also the more powerful kingdoms, though smaller ones should not be ignored, for a warlord's technology as well as sorcery counted for a lot during those times. This is perhaps best exhibited in the Nordics, whose borders were not comparable to the area of these giants, however were infamously ruled by a chaos-tainted tyrant called the Priest King. Also, being a practicing sorcerer, the campaign of Molnar Sen, wherein the Nordic Empire battles to defend itself against the Emperor's gene-enhanced armies, are recounted in detail within Valdor, Birth of the Imperium, and of which we will also touch on later in this video. Of the larger 5 empires, however, that is Ursh, High Brazil, America, the Pan-Pacific Empire, and the Antarctic kingdoms, Ursh is without a doubt the most aggressive. Before ultimately being conquered by the Emperor during the unification of Terra, Ursh's reputation of organised, brutal armed forces were a prevailing threat and justification for all surrounding territories to patrol their borders carefully and maintain as sizable standing military as possible. Besides the truly enormous amount of armed, trained fighters Ursh's ruler and warlord Caligan could call upon, that is somewhere between millions and billions, Ursh's military were both organised and adapted to any theatre of war they may need to battle within. This isn't even the most intimidating aspect of Ursh's forces, mind you. Within the chronicles of Ursh, it is said seas would run red with the blood of the slain, and that its armies would march billions strong. And whilst ancient chroniclers are more often than not shown to be greatly biased as well as exaggerated when concerning their own nation's feats, only a fool would completely dismiss these claims. What was truly horrifying concerning Ursh's armies was the fact Caligan's forces practiced foul warp magics, at least a portion of these sorcerers being referred to as wraith singers. Forces of both Ursh and those they wished to conquer, such as the technologically advanced hosts of the Nord-Afric conclaves, were noted as calling forth demons during battle. Do you find it shocking how common demonic rituals were during the Age of Strife? Of course, Ursh is a rather extreme example of behaviours, considering they were the nation with the most expansionist mindset during the latter years of the Age of Strife. Concerning corruption, and even horrific social practices, mind you, their cruelty and corruption was incomparable to the mind-bending, terror-inducing ways of the Nordic kingdoms, or the false idolization rampant throughout the Arctic. As the campaign of Molnar Sen in the Nordic territories is quite well documented, we will briefly touch on the Antarctic kingdom, otherwise known as Oriok. Now, unfortunately for those who dwelt within that frozen tundra, their society was the archetypal theocracy structured around the worst of deities. And of course, one of the earliest priorities in launching the imperial unification conquest was to erase religion and sorcery both, because in doing so, all those open doors in each person would not be utilised by the many beasts called forth from the ether. So you can see why an entire country structured around those very two ideals or traits is directly opposed to all the Emperor stood for. This of course would spell doom for the Antarctic kingdoms. What we do know of the people who dwelt there prior to their mass extermination was that they dwelt in caves and tunnels which were built to wind through mountains as well as underground. They did possess impressive weaponry, however, and brought it to bear in a face-off against the Emperor's early Astartes. Of course, taking into account the gene-wrought might, coupled with devastating weaponry each Astartes bore, this meant naught, as was the case for any techno-barbarian holdouts during the final stages of the unification of Terra, which saw a close to the Age of Strife. Speaking of the Nordic territory otherwise known as Morland Sen, under the infamous Priest King's sway, gives us a remarkable insight into not only what the grinding wars were like which brought an end to Terra's barbarous ways, but also to learn firsthand how truly lost and depraved humanity had become. Interestingly, the Emperor had actually visited this damnable kingdom in person prior to his launching of the Great Crusade across Terra. He knew firsthand the depravity which was commonplace within the walls of those towns and cities, and so, as soon as he possessed suitably numerous and equipped armies, struck out at the Priest King's holdings very early on. This fact alone, that the then would-be Emperor of Mankind would prioritise the extermination of this kingdom so early in his conquest, not to mention the fact Valdor himself is noted as saying the logistics of such an exercise were great, for it was not close to their own territories where they were strong. It is said of Morland Sen that the corruption of the chaos-tainted Priest King permeated the entire kingdom. When a lot of so-called innocents are butchered by the Emperor's Thunder Warriors during the last battle of the Nordic kingdom, Valdor laments the fact that the civilians killed could have been put to work, so it can be assumed not all were frothing cultists. The defining traits of the Nordic kingdom was its chaos taint, the sorcerous power wielded by the Priest King, the kingdom's pervasive mix of lawless barbarism and haughty indulgence that only true followers of chaos exhibit, the unforgiving frozen tundra which spelt doom for most invaders, and certainly, not least of all, the gene-wrought monstrosities birthed in that hellhole. Any hostile force wishing to bring battle to the Priest King's realm had to be equipped to also battle the depredations of the unforgiving environment, possess mental fortitude enough to not fall to the constant maddening whispers of chaos carried upon the razor-edged icicle winds, and to bring with them a well-drilled force of plentiful number who truly believed what they fight for. The reason for the latter is because every single person stepping foot in that forsaken land would be tested to their threshold and beyond. For this reason were the Emperor's Thunder Warriors invaluable. It speaks volumes that even with 22 regiments of mortal troopers and an entire Thunder Warriors legion, that within just the final battle of Morland Sen, over 7,000 Thunder Warriors perished. Of course, monstrosities of muscle, teeth and talon were birthed within the often unsanitary genetic workshops of barbarian warlords all across ancient Terra, and for Morland Sen, it was no different. Now, besides the nameless savage roving mutants of Terra's barren surface, there existed many clans of humans who patrolled what they considered their territory, searching for prey and plunder. They would form tribes of a sort, some shying away from the day's blaring heat within cave systems, or one of the many ruins which dotted Terra's surface, ancient sentinels of a time none now recall. Well, mostly nobody. We learn through Candewire's memoirs within the novel Valdor Birth of the Imperium that a particularly savage band of marauders called Zoipa lived in hovels and inhabited an area north of her parents' compound in southeast Afrique. She recalls the Zoipa utilised red trucks and made use of flame weapons in their raids. But what is of particular note is the fact that these raiders would sustain themselves on the meat of humans. Whilst there exist numerous types of cannibalism, a prevalent type during the Age of Strife was learned cannibalism. This is when behaviour such as the consumption of other humans is normalised within a society. Throughout the wastes of Terra, where wildlife, crops and water were certainly not abundant, there were many such cases of humans resorting to this strategy for survival. One can imagine that over the course of 5 millennia, these practices would have been so ingrained in the population which practiced survival cannibalism that they likely would have required complete purging during the Unification Wars. Aside from these tribes and kingdoms, travelling guns for hire would make their way across continents, plying their trade for whatever warlord or town would meet their demands for payments or maintain a suitable alehouse where their hard-earned pay could be spent on booze and company. It must be stressed that although an immense amount of knowledge had been lost between the dark age of technology and the age of strife, there was still some advanced tech which survived. One type is something that 40k as a whole is very famous for, that is bionics, or surgical improvement to aid in one's profession. In the case of mercenaries, there were particular augmentations which aided in both their ability to carry out their grisly work efficiently, as well as helping them survive between jobs. Oculus targeters to replace an eye, allowing the bearer to magnify far-off images. Appendages could be stripped out, then rebuilt using dermal muscular boosters, and even nervous systems threaded with pain dampeners. Those who provided the services of medical, technological alteration was sometimes referred to as flesh stitchers. One place to access such service was via the Mumbai Rashtra Combines, not far from the Himalayas, where the imperial palace would eventually be constructed. Concerning survival in such a harsh, oppressed world, as we have said, this was more dependent upon sheer luck, of not becoming a casualty in any one of the countless skirmishes and wars taking place through history. Otherwise, survival was dependent upon one's own instinct to avoid danger, or otherwise placing oneself in the right place at the right time to become an oppressor themselves, or at least on good terms. With the nuclear fallout still plaguing Terra's surface, Terra's mutation into a radiation-saturated dying rock was all but assured. We know various kingdoms, small and large, span the various land masses across the Earth's surface. However, radiation was a major hazard to any living soul. Of course, this would not just lead to death, but also mutation. And though we have never received a comprehensive guide or even series dedicated to fleshing out the barbaric years of that age, we know through many different novels, primarily of the Horus Heresy series or its spin-offs, that evidence of mankind's previous technological feats lay scattered, broken, and unused throughout the millennia, whilst mankind regressed into a more basic, instinctual state of existence, that of survival. Unused desalination plants sat immobile, either damaged during whichever conflict plagued their area, or simply unused for so long due to the majority of Terra's oceans evaporating. During the age of technology, humanity had even progressed to taming Terra's various climatic conditions, weather satellites curbing the worst of both the heat and the cold, so that much of Earth's surface was comfortably habitable. During the Age of Strife, these were no longer operational. Of course, we know this age of discourse would end, ushering in the bloody conquest referred to now as the Wars of Unity. The Emperor's armies, his gene-enhanced soldiery at the fore, would conquer kingdom after kingdom, with those guilty of worshipping dark gods being put to death without any attempt at integration by him. You see, he knew, even then, how insidious the denizens of warp space could be. There was little point in conquering the entirety of Earth if in the meantime sects of dark religious zealotry were growing in the shadow places. No, religion, the witch, mankind's paranormal and occult past had to be eradicated. In fact, it is a testament to how thoroughly this new Imperium would expunge the presence of those affected by the warp, that within only a century or so of carrying out this cleansing, the very thought of witchcraft or magic would cause any nearby to scoff. Never doubt the reach of the Imperium, nor its resolution. If you got this far into the video, comment below your favourite 40k character, so I know exactly who did. I do hope you've enjoyed this topic. It's not often spoken about. And remember that act of liking, sharing, and even hitting the notification bell helps our small channel to really grow. So to those who do, thank you very much. Don't forget to subscribe if you're not already, because we cover all new lore immediately after its release. Something I'm very invested in continuing to do on this channel. I want us all to grow in knowledge regarding this awesome setting, updating our knowledge as the storyline is advanced around us. Thanks so much for watching. Take it easy and have a good one.